the blockade, the U.S. blockade on Iran, and how effective that could be, and what is your understanding of this move? With the negotiation, the talks happening, and right in the middle of the talks in Islamabad, Donald Trump announcing a blockade on Iran. What does that mean?
First of all, let me say that I think bringing Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to confront the Iranians in Islamabad, even if they kept their mouths shut, was an era of absolute idiocy. Why would you bring the two people who pretended to be diplomats into that meeting, which you have given some credibility, limited to be sure, but some, and destroy it without even trying? I mean, the Iranians think those two guys are precisely what those two guys are: lying, deceitful, grifting jerks. Well, so why bring them? So that was my first impression of this whole thing. And then second was the cavalier way that we apparently treated the 10 points that the Iranians gave to the world, and that I got early because Trita Parsi did a translation and sent it to me. A little bit different order to the things stated, but nonetheless the same things. And knowing full well that there's not probably a single one on there that Trump gives a hang about, and certainly not very many, if any, that he would concede. And then to go into the negotiations. Well, I had to suppose that what was happening was exactly what happened before, that we were going to go into negotiations and we're going to attack them in the middle of the negotiations. And of course, as far as I can tell, despite word coming out of Jerusalem and word coming out of Washington about Lebanon, the Israelis didn't do squat to stop. They even speeded up and intensified their operations in Lebanon. So my question about the whole thing, Nima, get around to your question, is I don't understand what we were doing. I just don't understand what we were doing. Now, with regard to the blockade, I say the same thing, because we're not blockading anything. And apparently the limited attacks we made on Harg Island, if I'm being told correctly, I don't even know that we made the attacks, but that's what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing it from fairly reliable sources. What were they supposed to do? Because they were not sufficient to do anything significant in the way of damage. And was that because we simply couldn't do it? Or was it because, as Trump said afterwards, maybe trying to backfill, well, we didn't do anything really bad, but we will, holding that over their head? I don't know. But there is no control by anyone other than the Iranians, and they don't have full control, not even with the Omanis on the other side helping them, of the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. There simply isn't. You just watch it and there's not. So what are we trying to do? We're telling the world we're controlling it. We're not controlling it. The Iranians are telling the world that we're not controlling it, but they're not really doing anything untoward with regard to stopping warships or anything like that. So I don't know where we are. I don't know where we are, except I do know that I see a lot of tankers and a lot of ships still off the Strait, not plying the Strait. And I know that economists are telling me that by end of June, we'll have a recession, a global recession. And by end of August, beginning in September, we might have a global depression. And I know that all that Trump's saying about us having plenty of LNG and plenty of oil and all the rest of that garbage is irrelevant if the world's commerce is brought to some sort of a halt or even messed with majorly. Then you're going to have tremendous problems. And that disturbs me because I see the lack of strategic focus and the lack of a real strategy that I saw at the inception of this on 28 February now. So what are they doing is my question. And why are we doing it?
Yeah. I think Donald Trump needed somehow these 2 weeks of ceasefire. I don't know if that was merely a military strategy, because of the shortage of what is happening with offensive and defensive sort of, aspects of the war. But these 2 weeks is about sending more weapons to Israel, sending more missiles to the.
I don't see how that's happening in any great extent because we don't have them. I mean, we're stealing from allies, THAAD, things like that, but we can't bring tomahawks out of whole cloth. We can't invent these things out of thin air. And I know what the chart showed in terms of shortages and whether or not we could replenish those shortages in any reasonable amount of time. Some of the munitions, yes, we can, but critical munitions we can't, which is why you see Israel not shooting very much at Iranian missiles coming in. And you see more Iranian missiles landing and having devastating impact. I don't know if it's true or not. You know, I'm on YouTube now. Twice I'm on YouTube giving formal lectures. It's AI. It's AI generated. I've made a complaint to YouTube. They haven't done anything so far, but I'm on there. They're good lectures. Somebody wrote it and wrote a pretty good lecture. And I'm talking about now the principal water facility for Tel Aviv being utterly destroyed. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm saying it on YouTube, and I'm saying it with enormous skill and enormous facts, you know, at my fingertips. And you see it, you'll know it's not me. It's my picture, it's my voice, it's my mannerisms, but I'm doing this all the time, and I'm going, you know. And it's a great lecture on the Eilat water facility if it really happened. There, I'm saying on that YouTube, which has already got 39,000 hits in about an hour, it says Tel Aviv is without water. It's without potable water. Is that true? I don't know. I tried to check before I went on with Tucker. I don't know. I don't know if it's true or not. But if it is, and I don't put it beyond Iran's capability to have done it, they've showed that kind of accuracy and that kind of devastating missilery. It could be happening. And if that's happening and they don't have any water in Tel Aviv, that's a real problem, a significant problem from Netanyahu. Plus, I saw the polls this morning. He's down in the polls. What's he going to do now if it looks like, is he just going to say no elections? Yeah. That's, to me, right now, Lebanon and what he's doing in Lebanon, what Erdogan has said he might do to Netanyahu. I know he's a big mouthpiece. And what we've said apparently to Netanyahu to knock it off, what is happening elsewhere in Israel is indicative to me that we have lost the bubble on this. And Trump really doesn't know how to deal with Netanyahu, period, doesn't know. Even if he didn't have inordinate influences on him, like Miriam Adelson's money and all that, he doesn't know what to do about it. Did you see the interview with John Kerry where John Kerry was asked, had he ever dealt with Netanyahu? Yeah. Of course I have, you know, and he talked about what it was like, but that I don't know that this is true, but they were never as forthcoming as Trump is being with every request that Netanyahu makes. So why is that happening? Well, the suggestion there, of course, is Epstein and Miriam's dollars and such. But I think he's actually trying to develop some distance between himself and Netanyahu right now. And if Netanyahu doesn't do what he is told to do with regard to Lebanon, that distance is going to grow. Well, what does that mean? We're certainly not going to leave Israel alone, I don't believe. It's getting, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's getting more dangerous every minute, not better. You know, wars are supposed to, if you're winning, get better. This one's getting worse and worse and worse. And all Trump does is just keep pulling things out of his rear end.
Yeah. Here is the video that you mentioned, Larry.
By the way, do you know that was
the table?
Was Cargill actually attacked in a serious way?
I think recently, no. Just right after the ceasefire, there were some sort of rumors, but it didn't happen that much, no.
That's what I suspected, but I saw it again this morning, so, okay.
No, didn't happen.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
part of any conversations like that? I know he's made that pitches to past administrations. Were you ever a part of that? And were you surprised that he was able to convince Trump to do this?
Well, I was part of any number of conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu, conversations that took place in other countries.
Pitching the U.S. to strike Iran.
Yes, he wanted us to strike. He came to President Obama. He made a presentation to ask to strike. President Obama refused. President Biden refused. President Bush refused. The only president who has agreed to this, obviously, is President Trump. And it's really...
Larry, this guy was in the cage when it came to the previous presidency about Obama, Biden, George W. Bush. But right now he's out of the cage. He's doing whatever he wants to do. Even with J.D. Vance, he said that J.D. Vance is briefing him daily.
Briefing Kerry?
Briefing Benjamin Netanyahu.
Oh, Bibi, yeah.
Yeah. This is the reality of the Trump administration. I think nobody can ignore that Benjamin Netanyahu knows every detail about the negotiation, what's going on, what they're going to talk about, what would be the agenda under what. He knows everything. And
I was told he called him from Pakistan 6 or 7 times a day to let him know what was going on. Yeah. That's a hell of a way to conduct negotiations, isn't it? Bibi can't be there, but Bibi is there through the Vice President of the United States.
Donald Trump's problem is not in Washington, is in Israel.
Yes.
And he knows how to manipulate the situation and he has look at Steve Miller, you look at Jared Kushner.
Makes me think more.
Witkoff.
Yeah, it makes me think more and more and more that Bibi has an Epstein file, Mossad file on Trump. Probably Melania too. One of the reasons she came out preempting what was maybe going to come out about her was that fear. I think he has a file on Trump, and that file is damning. I can't explain Trump's behavior otherwise. Miriam's billions, I don't think, would buy the United States committing suicide, which to a certain degree it is doing with Donald Trump. I just don't believe it, but I would believe it if it were a really salacious Epstein file on Donald Trump and perhaps on his wife too. Because that's the kind of character that Donald Trump has. That kind of thing would drive him because that tarnishes his reputation, which is now being depicted as Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. He attacked Pope as well. He attacked and he said that he's not happy with what Pope is talking about.
And attacked him at a time that Leo, the first Augustinian, is getting ready to go to Augustus, his country in Africa, to celebrate a little bit. Augustus or Augustine, however you want to say it. That's unconscionable that he picked that moment to do it. Unconscionable that he did it anyway. I mean, the Pope has every right to say what he would say about the kind of killing we're doing in Iran, this indiscriminate bombing, and the kind of killing that Bibi's doing in Lebanon. He's killing druggists, dry cleaners, women and children. There's nothing about this that is Hezbollah oriented. It's just Bibi venting his ire on Lebanon. Lebanon sends some rockets in. He can't kill those people who've sent the rockets in, so he kills the people in the country.
No way that these negotiations in Washington, that we had the first round of these direct negotiations between the Lebanese government and Israelis. And the Lebanese part, they said that was positive, the first meeting. But I don't know how can these negotiations, is that possible to get somewhere with Israel? Because Israel doesn't want to get out of Lebanon. They want to stay there. They want to make a buffer zone even beyond the region that they're in.
Right.
This is the problem. I don't see Hezbollah, somehow backing down.
I don't either. And so far, I think there is a stalemate or Hezbollah is slightly winning if you count the number of tanks destroyed, the number of soldiers killed, the number of casualties in general. I think Hezbollah is winning, just as they did in 2006. And that makes Netanyahu mad. It makes him angry. And then he becomes even more vengeful and more poisonous in his decision making. He's also got an enormous problem in his own country with the reservist call up, where they have a 30% or so AWOL rate. And he's got a problem with he's running out of reservists. And to a certain extent, he's running out of an ability to manage his own economy, because he's had these people in arms for so long. He's calling even more up. Some are reporting, and that means they're not at their jobs. And the economy is already reeling from the attacks and so forth. I don't know how they do this without major changes, and I don't see Netanyahu making them. So I have to say that either somebody's going to shoot Netanyahu, well, a high possibility that it'll backfire on him, what he did to Rabin, for example, and a settler will shoot him. Now, he's well guarded, as I understand it. In fact, someone asked me this morning, how come you see these other people exposing themselves from time to time, other people being Iranians, Lebanese, and so forth, leaderships, and you never see Netanyahu exposing himself? Is he a big coward? My answer to them was yes, he is. He values his own life more than he values the life of the state of Israel, period. So how can you be a bigger coward than that?
Two major issues with the negotiations, Larry. One of them is the Strait of Hormuz, and the other is the nuclear program of Iran. It seems that the basic, the main disagreement between the two parties were based on these two issues.
But did they even talk about the other issues? My reports were that they just kind of desultorily dealt with the other issues, that those two issues dominated. Did they even talk about such issues as relieving sanctions, primary and secondary, reparations, and things like that?
It didn't get there.
I didn't think so. Yeah, that was the report I got. Yeah, those are, they've got to be important to the Iranians, and yet we didn't even get to them. I mean, we're so focused on those issues that we can't get to other issues. So how could you ever expect negotiations to succeed? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I said
they started.
I wanted you to talk.
No. They started, Larry. It seems that the negotiations were started by the case of Strait of Hormuz, and Donald Trump said, hey, "I want to be part of that. I want to make money out of this Strait of Hormuz." This is.
So go to the Omanis and ask them to cut you a share.
They said that this is not the Gulf of Mexico that you want to take some.
Did he want the name changed to the American Gulf?
He said that. I want to put it the Strait of Trump. It's
the
not
Strait of Trump. SOT.
This is, I think, the question with the negotiations, with the talk, is some sort of stalemate, Larry. I don't see any willingness on the part of the Trump administration to address that, because you have to get ready. If you're serious with the negotiations, you have to go the way that you saw. I've seen Iranian delegation going to Islamabad. I have never seen such a complete, they had everything there, each and every dimension of the negotiations there, economically, politically, legally, everything there to negotiate. But I haven't seen that on the part of the J.D. Vance and the negotiators from Washington.
We haven't sent that sort of team at all to Ukraine, to any other disputed area or problem that we have. We don't send a team. We didn't send it to Putin. We didn't send it to Lavrov. Marco Rubio didn't bring it to Riyadh. We don't send working groups and teams that know how to do the details of diplomacy. That old expression, the devil's in the details, is doubly true for diplomacy. It's the details when you're making treaties, when you're doing anything like that, but certainly in diplomacy in general, it's very, very detailed. And you need working groups. You should have had a working group for every one of the items on the agenda, at least one working group full of experts on that issue, like sanctions relief, primary and secondary. We don't do that. We just send a couple of jerks who are ultimately empowered by the President of the United States, and that power is you either do it our way or we'll blow you away. That's our idea of diplomacy.
Because the case of the nuclear program is so much complicated when it comes to the technical aspects of the deal. And you have to have the people who are capable of making, because the decision maker would hear from the technical teams.
Yes.
What does that mean? What does this mean? And how can we manage that? Then he comes to some sort of solution. We didn't see that.
The teams we took to the Soviet Union, Nima, would often fill 2 or 3 airplanes. That when we were doing a treaty like the ABM Treaty or like the SALT Treaty or the INF Treaty, Reykjavik, when we went to Reykjavik, that was probably a slimmed down team, if you will, because the president was along. It wasn't slimmed down in terms of the president, but it was slimmed down in terms of the issues that were going to be covered. Nonetheless, a pretty large team goes. Sometimes it was several airplanes full of people. We don't send anybody but Witkoff and Kushner and maybe 1 or 2. This time we sent the vice president. Whoopee.
Yeah.
Who is reporting all the time to Bibi, as you said.
Mm.
It almost, the way I was debriefed on it, it almost looked like he was more in touch with Bibi in terms of serious issues and discussions than he was the people across the table from him.
Larry, how does China see the blockade? Because we've learned from the defense ministry of China, they said, we're going to send our tankers in and out and nobody can do anything about it.
Right.
And
I think you're going to see more inclination by Xi Jinping to not take chances, because they're not really taking chances, but to stand up to the empire, because the empire is very, very out of its, let's put it this way. I was going to say out of its mind, but it's out of its mind with regard to what it's doing that China can interpret as indirectly, if not directly, aimed at it. Not at Iran, but at China. And one of the most ostentatious examples of this is the Israeli and U.S. bombing of that railroad. That railroad that was going to take about, I think it's 25 hours for that railroad. The ones that come through the center, it's 16 hours. Think about that for a minute. Pacific ports in China, instead of 2 to 2.5 to 3 days to get their commerce to the heart of Europe, it takes 16 hours. That is a hell of a change. That is a global event-changing change. And that one, I think I saw that it was 25 hours from the Pacific ports to Bandar Abbas or Chabahar, wherever the terminus is. And then they were going to go on up the Persian Gulf and into the heart of Europe from the soft underbelly. They're bombing that. Of course, it makes not much difference that you bomb railroads, because as the Germans and the Japanese and everybody else in World War II showed, you build the railroads back pretty fast. But that's directly aimed at China. Directly aimed at China. There's no possible confusion in Xi Jinping's mind or Wang Yi's mind or anybody in China's mind that that's what it's aimed at. And to a certain extent, this entire conflict, if it has any strategic rationale at all, it's China. Whether it's just the fact that China's friendly with Iran, or it's a bigger fact that China's using that railroad and it threatens maritime commerce. Imagine that. No need for the Bab el-Mandeb nor the Strait of Hormuz because everything's coming over land or through pipelines.